Order. Deputy call roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Here.
Mr. Way,
Here.
Mr. Bush,
Here.
Mr. Noppi,
Here.
Ms. Benner, here, Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
no Ms. Hamilton. We have a quorum.
Okay. Stephanie. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do. Stephanie Hensler, Planning Division.
Thank you. All right. Approval of minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review minutes from the last meeting? And if so, are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Been moved?
And seconded.
We have a motion by Mr. Sweeney, seconded by Mr. Way. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Fergus,
Approved.
Mr. Way,
Approved.
Mr. Bush,
Approved.
Mr. Noppi,
Approved.
Ms. Benner, approved, Mr. Sweeney.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, new applications. Our first application today is EF 2305 003. Address is 40 North Grub Street. Owner is Bishop Earl Fernandez, and the applicant is Chris Fires. Stephanie,
We
difficult.
we have our presentation on the zoning code update before we get into new applications.
Sorry. Let's go back then.
Sorry.
This is all completely out of order, but other than that. Yeah.
Hoping
I was just pulling-
right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, board members. Thanks for your service. As always, I'm Mark Travillis, the Planning Division Administrator, and I just have a few minutes, quick update on the city's effort to update the zoning code. This effort's being called Zone In. If you haven't seen anything on it, by the time I'm done, I'll mention website where you could sign up for emails and so forth. Is kind of our prime message, is to be sure you're aware of this effort. As you know, the city's growing, it's experiencing tremendous growth, and we expect this to continue. And there's a number of efforts that are underway in order to help the city guide this growth, including Link Us, the city's housing strategy, environmental sustainability efforts, and the modernization of the city zoning code. The zoning code hasn't been updated in 70 years, so it's long overdue. There was a 2021 assessment that affirmed that the zoning code really isn't serving the city and its goal to be an equitable, thriving community. And both Mayor Ginther and City Council repeatedly expressed their support for doing this project. Where to start was a really important question. It's a large city, it's a complicated project, and where the city is starting, it's on its primary corridors. That's going to be the current phase, the first phase of the zoning code update. And Zone In has identified 62 quote unquote main streets and commercial centers that make the most sense for where we start. There's a map that's in your document. And for anybody that goes to the website, there's an interactive map that goes into it parcel by parcel. So as far as East Franklinton is concerned, it's really the Broad Street district of the East Franklinton zoning district that would be the focus area here in this phase. And the corridors, the main streets, came to be identified both through data, policy, and public input, really indicating that this is the most appropriate place to start. These are areas that have the greatest development capacity to deliver housing, mobility, and employment opportunities in a way that's both economically and environmentally sustainable. The current zoning code is restricting our community's potential. While the corridors are critical to supporting thoughtful, equitable growth, they're really not delivering the results that the city and the community desires. If we look at these areas, which total about 145 miles of corridors, 80% of the areas have a 35-foot height limit. So this is the same as a single family home. This is where we're wanting to direct and support growth, and it has a 35 height limit. Additionally, 80% of these areas, housing is either not permitted on the ground floor or not permitted at all. Furthermore, this in light of research like Insight 2050, community plans, like the Hilltop Plan, the East Franklinton Plan, which we put into place through the zoning district that call for intensification of corridors, we have this disconnect. So these are all challenges that point to the need for the update of the zoning code. City staff, in cooperation with the consultant team, identified the areas that are in the map, the focus areas through existing zoning, commercial overlays in place, plans that recommend mixed use development, current code of both bus routes, future link us corridors, and other site-specific considerations. So that's how this map came to be. And then my last points are really, again, if you haven't been there, the easiest way to find the website is to Google zoning Columbus. The map is there again. There's information about upcoming opportunities to engage. Most near term is June 1st at the Schiller Park Recreation Center, where there'll be a presentation and breakout groups. We're really counting on you all to participate as board members, as well as other folks that you know. You all know people I know that operate in the neighborhood. You're in East Franklinton, you own a business, you know others. And so this is a stage where we're looking for people to plug in, and we're asking for your help to get there. And if you haven't signed up, if you're not already getting the emails, please go ahead and do so you can become aware of opportunities to engage as they come up in the upcoming weeks and months. So that's a quick summary. Just wanted to share that, and happy to answer any questions now that you might have, or feel free to check in with any of us moving forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, to reiterate, new applications. EF 2305-003, 40 North Broad Street. Owner is Bishop Earl Fernandez. The applicant is Chris Myers. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is EF 2305-003, 40 North Grove Street. This is a request for action. The applicant's requesting review and action on a proposed addition to the existing convent building and associated site work located within the Broad Street subdistrict. The proposal includes the following: a connector with bell tower from the existing convent to a proposed covered walkway and a future chapel. 6-foot high black aluminum fencing along the southeast and part of the north property lines. A 6-foot high brick wall with metal access gate along part of the north property line between the covered walkway and the existing convent. Lighting for the connector and covered walkway, landscaping, and then also zoning clearance to legitimize the existing dumpsters located on the property to the north of the project site, which is also owned by the convent. The submission includes site plans, elevations, renderings, and material specifications and cut sheets. A larger version of this project was previously reviewed and approved by the EFRB in November 2020. I have the previous materials linked here for your reference. A certificate of approval was never issued for that project. The applicant is now returning to the board to request approval of a first phase of the project and will return subsequently for the chapel and guest house phases in the future. The proposal is generally consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan states that a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate for East Franklinton, with a preference for contemporary building design and materials. The East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan also recommends that historic and other contributing buildings should be preserved to the extent possible and incorporated into new development. Further, the plan recommends that landscaping should enhance structures, create and define public and private spaces, and provide aesthetic appeal, and that proposals should include street trees on all public streets. Finally, the plan recommends that lighting should be appropriate to its location and utilized to enhance security and highlight distinguishing characteristics of the buildings. The proposal is consistent with all of these recommendations. The plan also recommends that new construction be accessible and visitable, as well as have primary entrances that are oriented to the primary street. The proposal is semi-consistent with these recommendations, as the fencing and brick wall limit visitability, and the main entrance to the bell tower and connector is on the interior courtyard. Staff recognizes the nature of the use and does not oppose these deviations. However, the plan also recommends that dumpsters should be located to the rear of buildings and screened to their full height on all sides by screening that is complementary to the building. The existing dumpsters are located on the vacant parcel to the north of the project site and are unscreened. The applicant will need zoning clearance to permit dumpsters on a vacant property. Staff supports legitimizing the existing location of the dumpsters, but requests the applicant screen the dumpsters for consistency with plan recommendations. Staff's recommending conditional.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? Not? You have one representative of the applicant. Can you state your name, please, for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Myers with Myers and Associates Architects.
And Mr. Myers, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Stephanie. We've had an opportunity over these last few weeks to interact quite a bit and just making sure all the information we're submitting is complete. It's been very helpful. We appreciate all your participation. As Stephanie had mentioned, we had been before the commission back in November of 2020. We had a review. It's very similar to that. COVID happened. Fundraising for projects like this took longer than expected, but with it being fully funded, we're kind of back, and I think our expiration on our review was lapsed by a little bit, so we thought it'd be wise to just resubmit. First, to tell you a bit about the Brigittine Sisters. They're a Catholic order of nuns. They have their main mother house convent is actually in Rome, right near the Vatican. They were founded in 1378. They're in 19 countries, and they actually have two convents here in the United States, one in Connecticut and one in Franklinton. So it's a great honor to have them kind of within our city. Their community service and outreach is rooted in hospitality. And so what that means is this future portion of the project, as we go into these next phases, will include a couple of things. So this first phase is what we're calling a connector and bell tower, and it goes to a cloistered walkway that creates an enclosure around the gardens that they currently have in the back of the convent building. The gray building on the left side is their current convent. There's 12 sisters who live there full-time, and many travel from other countries and stay here often. The next phase will be that lighter yellow area called phase 2. That will be a chapel. It's about an 8,000 square foot chapel. We included the renderings that are currently being used for a fundraising campaign. That is probably 75% funded, and we'll be back before you hopefully very soon with that portion of the project. And then the third phase is what's called the retreat house or a guest house. On the site plan, that would be to the north of the chapel. The retreat house is essentially, think of like a bed and breakfast. The sisters operate for travelers who might be in visiting someone who's staying in a hospital, and their reason for coming to Columbus is because of the amount of medical institutions that we have here. Their reason specifically for being in Franklinton was really the high amount of community activity that there is, and wanting to be a part of the growth of that area of the city of Columbus. So the first phase is really, it's a connector and a bell tower. It's an extension of the convent. It's just over 1,000 square feet, so it's a fairly small footprint, and it's eventually the connector that goes directly into the chapel. Stephanie had mentioned the main door location for this portion of the project, and the reason it's facing into the courtyard because it's actually part of what's called the cloistered area of the convent. It's really the space that only the sisters go to. So that's not where the public would come into. There are main entry doors over on Grub Street on the convent. There's a community room on the north end of that building. And then ultimately the chapel will have access to the community as well. The conditions on the building, I think we're in compliance with virtually everything. We have material samples, if those are something you'd be interested in seeing. The renderings kind of give you a depiction of our attention to size and scale. And you see the, sorry if we can go back. You see the existing convent long ago, I think was a small school. It's been converted. We were part of the restoration and code upgrades to the building many years ago before they moved in. And then the connector, you can see where the metal roof starts from that portion to the right is all that we're looking for approval for today. The dumpster is a thing that came up as well. The sisters are super nice people. I think it's actually the dumpster for the daycare across the street, and they're letting them put it on the property that they own. So we're in conversations with the sisters and the preschool. Certainly want to create compliance and screen the dumpster, but it might not even stay in that location. We might find maybe a better spot for it. So happy to keep that as a condition of our review, but I think that dumpster is probably going to find a different spot entirely. The sisters have very, very little trash that they create, so we actually really don't need much of a dumpster. I'm happy to go through every rendering and plan and tell you the history of the Bridgetines, but I'm also happy to just answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for the applicants?
And just to add, they are looking for full approval, so this does include lighting and landscaping.
We have to have a mic on.
It would be helpful. Thank you.
So can you flip through, well,
I'd be happy
I
to.
just wanted the future
Sure.
phase. We're just interested in, if you have,
Renderings.
you have some renderings in here, but I need some orientation.
All right, I'll go quick, but let's start at the beginning. Okay. So again, the gray building is an existing convent. The darker yellow is what we're looking at today. The lighter yellow is it's a full chapel. Has seating for, I think we're at about 120. It will be open for services. However, the Holy Family Church is on the opposite corner of the intersection. So the size of that church is obviously far greater. And then there's a connection from the entry of the chapel into the retreat house, as well as off of the street. There will be one as well. The retreat house is very diagrammatic right now. It really hasn't gone through much development. The chapel has gone through a lot more development and engineering as well. Within the chapel, between in the site planning, the cloister running through middle of the site, the retreat house, and the north end of the chapel create a second courtyard, which is for guests staying in the retreat house. The rectangles that you see to the left side of that cloistered walkway, those are all gardens that are currently there. The sisters grow vegetables for the soup kitchen at the church and flowers that they give out at the hospitals. Did that answer your question about the site?
So there's a rendering in here, I think from whatever the name of that street is,
This one?
the one that runs north-south. That one, is that, so that's Gay Street on the left, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's no real entrances to that building on Gay Street, right?
Into the bell tower?
Or just into into existing and future?
No.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be basically a very nicely articulated solid wall, right?
Well, yeah, there's windows and the chapel
Yeah.
has stained glass.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a application you're reviewing later is the building that's right to the south of us. So yeah, that gives you a depiction of that elevation.
I'm thinking about this project in relationship to other projects that
Sure.
we're reviewing. It's just helpful to know what's happening on
Yeah,
each side of the street. And I think it continues to be a beautiful project. I was going to make a comment about the shrubs that you have lining the colonnade. It's a plant that I'm not really familiar with. It appears to be not evergreen, but deciduous, but ultimately it's going to be inside the courtyard, so it's not going to have any kind of, so.
yeah,
We have a comment that it's more of a temporary.
it's absolutely temporary, is fair to say. If we can keep going, I'll walk through some other views. The top is courtyard elevation. from the garden. So this is north looking south. The Gay Street elevation that you see for this phase, the fence is hopefully very temporary because we're hopeful for the chapel to begin soon. Other elevations, that's the interior elevation of the walkway. Close up of the south portion of today's project to be reviewed. This is a view prior to the chapel starting of what you would see from that Gay Street, so that might help the conversation. It's from inside the courtyard. I think that was the stair or the door that was in question about, is that an entry? But it's really not. It's more about their exit to the courtyard. The concept at this stage for the chapel, this is on the southeast corner of the overall block. That's the planned interior.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not entertain a motion at this time.
Oh, motion to approve. I think it's a beautiful project. So,
Thanks, Ken.
What about the condition regarding the dumpster?
That is a zoning code issue that you can't have dumpsters on a vacant property. So they need zoning clearance to keep those dumpsters.
but they're saying they're
If they do get the zoning clearance, then we want the dumpsters screened.
Could I suggest that, prior to any construction, we have the dumpster removed because that's our intent.
Answer, thank you. So, I second.
If the dumpster in its current situation is a code violation, which is not great. So,
I'd also be happy to say within 30 days, the dumpster will be removed.
you all can do,
I thought you said prior to starting of construction, it would be
Correct.
removed. So can we put that into the language of the,
there's no way that we could enforce that because I'm gonna have to stamp drawings for them to move forward with permitting. And the problem is that the plan says that dumpsters should be fully screened, and these are the dumpsters that are servicing the site, even though they're on a different property.
but are they owned by the convent?
They're sitting on their property.
So they're on the
The land is Convent's land.
I don't think it's their dumpster,
Right.
but they're, in their kindness, they're allowing it to be there.
But because they're sitting on convent property, they should be properly screened.
Correct.
Yes.
So if they're not shown on the documents that you're stamping, then you don't have to worry about it. So if the set that's being submitted doesn't show dumpsters, then there's no concern.
Suppose. I mean, this whole conversation came about because the plan recommends the dumpsters be fully screened, and I said, where are the dumpsters? And then we discovered that the dumpsters are, so.
Okay, so if the dumpsters continue to be on the property, then we can require the dumpster to be screened, right?
And we would support that.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
The easiest thing to do, if the intention is that the dumpsters will be relocated very soon, is that before you even submit the permit set to be stamped, is that the dumpster situation is resolved.
We can do that.
all right, so the motion then, if I can state this correctly, is that the application be approved as submitted with the condition that if there is a dumpster that continues to be located on the property, it shall be screened pursuant to the requirements of the plan.
Yes. I
Thank
think
you.
that's.
We're agreeable to
All right. Ken made that motion. I
I made
second it.
that.
Thank you. Recording is over.
Okay, thank you for walking through that. Okay, Mr. Burks,
Approved.
Mr. Wick,
Approved.
Mr. Bush,
Approved.
Mr. Noffi,
Approved.
Ms. Bennett, approved, Mr. Sweeney,
Approved.
motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself from the next application as I am the applicant.
So recused, Mr. Sweeney. Next application is EF 23-05-004. Address is 500 West Walnut Street, and the applicant and owner is Jim Sweeney. Staff report, please.
Sure. So just a note before we dive into this, so I had a question about it. So in the event that we have a board member commission, and for any of the boards and commissions that is also an applicant, or the owner applicant, it is best practice to recuse yourself and have someone else able to represent the project on your behalf, whether that's an owner agent or the architect. We can't require that. But it is best practice. I didn't realize that until like 1:30, at which point I made Jim aware and he could not accommodate. But just letting everyone know that is the best practice, is that someone else would represent the project on your behalf.
Okay, thank you.
All right, staff report. This is EF 23-05-004 for 500 West Walnut. The applicant is requesting review and action for exterior building alterations, landscaping, and a change of use at 500 West Walnut Street, located within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The project would convert an existing single-family home into a commercial building with an eating and drinking establishment and outdoor patios. The current proposal includes the following: a new 492 square foot rear deck with 40-foot steel railing, relocated mechanical to be on the rear deck and screened, new 19 square foot single-story addition on the west side of the existing house to accommodate restrooms, siding and trim to be hardy and painted to match existing, new concrete ADA ramp with concrete landing, removal of existing mature tree between 500 and 506 West Walnut to accommodate new ADA entrance, existing chain link fence along the north and west property line to remain, existing 6-foot wood privacy fence along the east property line to remain, removal of existing chain link fence in front of the house, a new 110 square foot concrete patio with 36-inch steel rail patio fence around the perimeter, and dumpster with 6-foot wood screening enclosure located on the northeast corner of the property. Applicant to return separately for approval of any graphics and/or signage. The submission includes site plans, elevations, existing condition photos, and material specifications and cut sheets. The proposal is generally consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan, and the code permits the proposed uses. The plan recommends historic buildings be preserved to the extent possible and that ADA accessibility be provided. The applicant is repurposing a historic home in the neighborhood and proposing a concrete ramp to make the establishment accessible. Further, the plan recommends screening, ground mounted mechanical, and the use of landscaping to provide aesthetic appeal and environmental benefits. Finally, the plan recommends incorporation of SEP-10 principles to create a safer environment. The proposed front patio increases the number of eyes on the street, and the proposal is consistent with these guidelines. However, the plan also recommends when a proposed use may conflict with adjacent uses, such conflict should be remedied or minimized through design, and that 6-foot board-on-board fence or comparable be used as screening between non-residential and residential uses. The applicant is proposing to keep the existing chain link fence along the north and west property lines. Further, the plan recommends that lighting be fully shielded and directed downward. The proposed porch pendant is not fully shielded. The proposal is somewhat consistent with these guidelines. As such, staff recommends conditional approval, with the conditions being replacing the existing chain link fence in the rear yard with a 6-foot board-on-board fence and replacing the porch pendant light with one that is fully shielded and directed downward.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Not? Go ahead.
So this is the process, this still has to go through code review, right?
You mean like
What's
compliance?
So some,
I don't know based on the scale of the project.
It actually has gone through the one-stop shop.
and so I should just ask the applicant this question.
Sorry.
Then only get the applicants
Yeah,
sworn in, we have a
exactly.
conversation here.
Yeah.
Jim, state your name for the record, please.
James Sweeney?
And you swear or affirm the statements that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
Okay, there we go.
You want me to dive in?
Dive in. Have at it.
I was just gonna ask a question about the ADA ramp, but whether that's been approved, and if there's some things that I've noticed that don't, to me, appear to be ADA compliant, so if it's been through the city process and they said it is, then I must be wrong.
That is outside of my process. The applicant could speak to if there
We
were
have
concerns.
taken this through site review through the one-stop shop.
Yeah.
And they waved this through.
Okay.
I do have one comment, Stephanie, something I caught just this afternoon. You mentioned in the your staff report that it would be a concrete ramp, but in fact, we intended to be a wooden ramp.
I think it was just the concrete landing.
Correct. But that, yeah, the concrete landing getting essentially from sidewalk level to grade, and then after that will be wood to the deck.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of my questions, was it says that, yeah, it doesn't appear that way in the.
It's a lot of concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually is, it's called out in number 13 on the north elevation as such.
So,
I apologize for that.
we want Jim to do a presentation.
Jim, did you want to present? And then we can ask some more questions.
Oh, I'll pass on presenting, as I think everybody's very familiar with the project. I've been here a few times.
Yeah.
I'll just submit for questions.
And this is a change of use from last time you were here. It was previously approved as a mixed use.
Right. So I'll give some context to that. So the original idea was that there would be an apartment upstairs, which led to a conflict of an access point to the apartment. There was going to be a stair on the west side, and that's the only place I could also put a ramp, as the alley behind the house does not exist yet. There's a paper alley behind the house. I had expected at some point the city would be paving that alley. Hopefully it will still happen. But as for the time being, I have to work around that. And so the conflict that existed made me believe that, maybe I should just abandon the idea of having residents above the business and just use that second floor for the business, which would provide things I would probably need anyway, such as a storage area, an office, things like that.
So I have some follow-up questions, might as well keep going.
Go ahead.
So the last time you were here, we talked about the tree in front.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is that that tree has been so loved that it can't, it really doesn't have a life anymore, or?
Yeah, a couple things on the tree. With staff's help, I talked to the city arborist, and he let us know, stop me where I go straight here, Stephanie, that essentially it's privately owned tree. It's, the ownership is somewhat obscure since it crosses property lines. So I've been talking to my neighbor, who I keep in close contact with on all of this. He included an email saying that if you need to tear down the tree, tear it down. If you need to cut into it, cut into it. I mean, I can't verbatim what he said. However, I did talk to my contractor, who said, in order to build the ramp, essentially, my idea was, why don't I carve into the tree and build my ramp where I have to build it and see what happens? And he said, the tree will fall over if you do that. And nobody wants the tree to fall over on one of these little houses. So the plan now, in consultation with Jason, I mentioned this to staff, is just to take the tree down. And again, the city arborist, what did I say, arbiter? Arborist, said really the city doesn't have any power or say over what happens to that tree, but I'm also happy to provide a new tree to replace it on my own property. And it's on the drawings.
It's one of the few trees on Walnut Street.
It's the only one, and I wish we could keep it, I really did.
I know, it's just one of those things that it just, it adds to the character of the street. It's not just the houses, but.
I've been trying to figure out how to get a tree in there somewhere, but I have a 25 foot wide lot, and there's no place to do it. With a ramp.
I'm gonna shift gears. The windows that are on to the left, the right side of the property, that in the notes, it says that they have to be removed because they're not
Yeah.
compliant. Could you explain that?
Sure, that's a fire code issue. Since we're changing use from commercial to residential, we have to be, and we're held to new construction standards on fire, which means that it has to be rated for, I think it's 2-hour separation, meaning a fire could burn inside for 2 hours before it catches the next property on fire. And because we're within 10 feet of the adjacent of the property line, we have to assume that the neighbor is going to be building out to their line as well. So that's why we're held to that standard.
Is it possible to find windows that meet that requirement, the fire requirement?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, this comes from the architect, so not that we're aware of.
And there is a window on on the other side.
There's one. Now, the loss of the windows is a result of a calculation, total square area of that wall. It can't, I believe it can't be under 85% or under 15% opaque. You can't be open more than 15% now because the other wall is larger. We're talking about now the west wall versus the east wall. It's larger and there's only one window. The calculation says that window, I'm sorry, two windows. So those two windows can remain.
Yeah, there's actually 3 windows. On that
That's
side.
true.
There's two on the upper floor and one on the,
Yeah, there's a tiny one.
yeah. The reason I bring it up, and I guess, you know, fire code is fire code, right?
Mhm.
Is that it's part of the character of the house, right? It's a shame. to
True,
give up.
it is. And believe me, I mean, my original goal in doing these kind of projects is to find ways to adaptively reuse the houses so they don't fall, you know, under the wrecking ball like everything else around us.
Right.
That they'll be economically viable without staying a residence. And so you know, it is heartbreaking to lose windows, especially the ones I put in myself. However, you don't really see them from the street. Especially if the neighbor chooses at some point to build up closer to their property line, you won't ever see it.
Okay.
And again, all windows that face south and north remain.
Right. Let's talk about the fence.
Mhm.
What I was unclear in the drawings about is the code is a board-on-board fence for the whole length of the property, is that correct?
The plan says, board-on-board fence between residential and non-residential, so.
And so it would technically be on both sides on the property line versus or in from the property line. And Jim, you're proposing that, you said the existing chain link fence would remain. I was having trouble seeing where.
Yeah, I'm asking not to put a privacy fence on the west line as it's contrary to what we're planning to do with the street. We're hoping for flexibility to have some engagement between the neighbor to the west and my property. Some visual communication that a privacy fence would ruin.
But it would also be required on the east side too,
It's there on the east side.
already.
Yeah, there's yes.
It's, I'm sorry, it's not on my property, it's the neighbor has one.
Ah, okay, got it. Does that show up on the? Again, I was going to Google Earth and
Yeah, I know.
it's hard to see, so.
It's these two fence lines, right, that are existing
Yeah.
in Chain Link. This one, and this. There is existing privacy fence here. It's these two that are the existing chain link that you're proposing to keep.
Keep.
So in the elevations, it shows a wood fence on the east side, but that's an existing fence?
Does it? The north elevation or the south elevation?
Fine. Let me scroll here. It would, maybe it's not in, where did I see, it's on the, where did I see that?
Oh,
Yeah, so it shows up on the,
on the north elevation.
well, if you look at the east elevation, and you look where you have the new tree in the back, it shows a solid fence across there. That's,
Yeah, elevation note 22, it says in the beyond is the 6-foot tall privacy fence on neighboring property.
That's the neighbors.
so that's what I'm trying to figure out what, so you're not showing anything new in terms of privacy, it's all just what's existing there.
No, not on the side.
Okay.
It would create, it would create a weird gap. You understand that the houses here are not centered on the properties, right? They're worse than that. They're actually along the property line opposite from where the front door is. So my property line is right outside my front door to the left, even though my front door is oriented on the left side of the house. And so it would be basically putting a fence 3 feet from another fence.
Right, no, I get that, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out what's there, and what's not there.
Yeah.
based on what staff is saying in terms of the need for a board fence.
That is something you all can be okay with the proposal that I was just pointing out the inconsistency with the plan recommending board on board between residential and non-residential.
So, with that back half that you're wanting to keep the chain link on, like the paper alley as we refer to it as now, is there any concern about people using that space back there, people walking up and seeing in there, or?
People do. I'm not concerned about it. I mean, people coming in off the paper alley
Yeah.
and accessing the yard, I assume they're going to. I will, if the city tells me not to allow it, I won't allow it.
Gotcha.
But as it is, it's also a point of egress in case of emergencies. I mean, we're talking about kind of the Wild West here. There's nothing there. And so I don't know that there's, I mean, it's a good question. Is it a point of egress? I don't know. I mean, yes, it could be.
Is there anything in particular that would be distinguishing about this to allow a chain link fence? So such that when future applicants come in with chain link fences, we don't have a bad precedent sitting in our way.
Well, I think we have a precedence the other way that we don't typically approve chain link fences.
Right,
So that's and again,
right. I mean, if we were to approve his, there needs to be a good reason.
right,
About point.
right.
So that's what I'm asking that question. I don't know the answer. Jim, maybe you can provide me with that answer.
And the question is, if you approve the remaining of the existing fence to remain in place, then how does that protect you from future precedents when people also have
Yeah,
remaining
is
chain
there
link
anything
fences?
distinguishing about why we should allow you to keep that fence in place?
Because I have a dog. I think the character, the intent of the plan is to make a dynamic and creative use of the existing places. And this is residential in character, yet commercial in use. So there are blurry lines sometimes in between the two. And the other reason is that I've been waiting for the city to improve my alley for 5 years now. And I anticipate that someday that's going to happen and there will be changes. Until then, I want to be able to keep my dividing line between my property and what's there. I guess what I'm saying is if the publicly owned property adjacent to my own is intended to be improved, then I'll roll with that change when it comes. Until then, I'd like to be able to continue to live or have my space defined the way it's defined.
Well, so if you were to replace that portion of chain link fence with a board on board, would that be detrimental to the character of what you're trying to do?
Yes,
Why is that?
because this is about community and not separating uses necessarily. It's about views from Town Street, from other places. I don't think that a 6 foot high privacy fence is going to instill the sort of community aspect that we're trying to get on Walnut Street and frankly in Franklinton. And so I'm asking for that to be waived in this case.
Discussion?
Yeah, I am interested in the fence too, and so the chain link fence kind of feels like community to you. You feel chain link is community.
It's a 3 foot high chain link fence. It's completely opaque. A 6 foot high fence, I'm 5'10", I wouldn't be able to see over that. It would basically cordon off a little space instead of having like I said, a visual communication to the rest of the place, which is the same thing I'm trying to achieve to the west with the neighbor's property. Now, I'm happy to build fences and then come back and tear them down when we redevelop things in a more sort of cohesive manner. Now, if I own the property to the west of me, that would be a different situation because we're combining properties. This essentially is trying to make a more dynamic sort of community initiative without necessarily breaking it up into pieces and separating everything. Yes, sir.
So to put it another way or read between the lines, if the property to the west were to become its own establishment or a place of congregation where people are in the backyard, you're hoping that, you know, there wouldn't be a tall opaque fence dividing those two establishments? Is that the idea?
That's the idea. That's the plan. That's why my neighbor has given in an email his concurrence or his allowance or his preference to not have a 6-foot high privacy fence in between our two properties. Because in the future, we intend to have the two properties not combined necessarily, but could communicate.
Which makes me understand why it would be between them, but like as that back half, I kind of get your idea of like being able to see the venue from Town Street, because it is something that you can see as you're walking down the street.
Yeah.
But if, you know, for some intended purpose, that's something that's built right there behind that space between Town Street and the paper alley, that I keep highlighting that way. I would say that might be the only issue about being able to see from there.
Could be. And, you know, in order to move forward, I don't want to have to come back again. This will be my third time. I would love to get this wrapped up and more than happy to add fences, particularly the one to the rear. That's not a big expense or problem to do. I just don't want to have to delay another month.
I see the fence to the rear as being the more important one of the two. If you've got a neighbor that says, gee, I don't want a board fence, I prefer to have a shorter chain link fence, that, I suppose that's distinguishing.
Assuming that neighbor's always there.
Well,
Right?
Yeah.
We can't plan on.
can't plan on that, no, I understand that.
And we've denied chain link fences in the past. And again, since I'm sort of new to this, what is the history of people that have submitted chain link fences? Because
I can't think of an instance where we approved the chain link fence,
Remaining or new?
Remaining.
Or both?
or both. Of,
We had a project last year, the U Prep School on State that had existing chain link fence around the parking lot, but all they were looking for was zoning clearance. They weren't doing any site work besides restriping the parking lot. So in that instance, we were fine with say, but I think generally, Lauren, to your question, chain link comes up often, potentially as like a screening option, and it's not appropriate for screening because it is, you know, opaque. It's not really screening anything. Or in this instance, it's a use question. Understanding the intention of the neighboring house in the future, at this point, you would be looking at a commercial structure next to a residential structure, and that's where it comes up in the plan, recommends 6-foot board on board when there's a conflict in uses like that.
So to move this and on to the next stage, I'll be happy to add fences or one or both.
let's say
Is there-
everybody, let's poll this.
is there a specific height that it has to be, or is that also like, looking at the chain link, I know that there's shorter fences at the same height as a chain link, then there's 6 feet, so is that, that's an important piece too, the height on it, it needs to be
When,
6.
in the instance when it's between uses, the plan recommends 6-foot board on board. But again, that's something you all have the ability to take into consideration what the applicant is sharing, and, you know, it's just it's a plan recommendation. So if you feel that in this instance, there is a case to be made and not a precedent to be set that you all don't want to set,
I'll see what
condition on it, or
the ignorance of both parties, it sounds like, you know, I would see that's. I would be able to say that was okay.
So it's a side fence we're talking about.
Yeah, the back fence though, like, I mean, I think I'll echo something like the concerns in that, you know, but I also see what he's saying with the being able to be visible from Town Street.
And the fact that I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the city has been saying they're going to complete the alley behind well, at least 3 years ago in emails, we can do this, we can fix your alley. As I have asked many times, why does Franklinton not have proper alleys at all? I mean, in that case, if and when that happens, that board fence in the back will need to be removed for construction. and then replace.
Well, unless you build that fence on your property, then they shouldn't have to touch it if it's on your property.
When I would build it on the property line.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they wouldn't, if they're gonna
Okay.
put the alley, they wouldn't be on your property, they'd be in the alley, the paper alley.
I know a little bit about construction on roads these days. Quite a lot, actually. They paved my road today, blacktopped it. Yeah, that's fine. Believe me, if there's a way to do this, I'll be happy to put a fence on that, on the backside. I kind of didn't think about it, honestly.
So Jim, think about it, maybe a little bit longer term, like if they do improve the alley, right?
Uh-huh.
You're gonna wanna have access back there. Seems to me that if there was a fence back there, that you'd wanna put a gate into it, that you know, sort of a double gate, so that you had access in your property.
Yeah.
And I think one of the questions that came up in our last review was the trash removal. How do you get the trash out of here?
Mhm.
So, you know, in my mind, what you're creating is kind of a enclave back there that you fenced off. You've got the bike rack, you've got trash back there, you've got some privacy for the people that are sitting back there or whatever. You've got, you know, you're proposing the new tree. So you're kind of creating a space there, and it seems like that's the area I think I heard, that's the area where I think there would be support to enclose that with the fence, but not necessarily run it along the entire property line. I don't think that needs to happen.
So we have the side and the rear, okay?
Yeah, well, I would say, if you look at the east elevation, the fence could come up to the railing, you know, it's got, that east elevation actually paints a pretty interesting picture. As you can see the fence beyond, and then how it's kind of the height of the railing that's around the patio or the deck. And it kind of, it's all at the same height, so it kind of all works together as a unit. And then, so I was gonna build on that just a little bit. So the screening under the deck is the crosshatch lattice.
Uh-huh.
And I was gonna suggest that we're gonna do a vertical board fence, that screening or skirting could actually be also a vertical board. So from a design standpoint, it's all kind of tying in together. And I think the lattice screening is very residential, and if this is becoming more of a commercial establishment, you want to go a little bit higher end.
Mm.
So that would be how you then, from a design standpoint, you tie everything together.
Okay.
And then one other point, well, being the landscape architect, you have that planting space between the handicap ramp and the house,
Uh-huh.
and you've got hostas proposed, which are perennials. You know, they're not going to be there in the winter. Of whether you could consider putting something evergreen in there that would be green all year round, and it also would help to kind of be a buffer to the foundation on the house.
So switch to an evergreen plant. Yeah.
I mean, those are my, and also, you said you were gonna replace the tree in the front, right? Did I hear you say that?
Yeah, it's in the back, so you can see.
Like, you put it in the back though.
Yeah.
Is that what the dogwood is for? Is that's the replacement tree?
I'm gonna plant a new tree on the property,
Yeah.
even though the one is gonna go away, and even my tree. Yeah.
Well, we talked last time, there's no place to put it in the front, but
I'm not putting it in the front, I'm putting it in the back.
yeah. All right. Well, there's no requirement in the front, right?
There's no requirement at all because this is a private tree.
Oh, that's right.
So-
It's a private tree.
Out of the goodness of his heart. he
So it's the
replaced
kindness of
tree.
my heart for this tree.
Well, I would still encourage you to see if you can save that tree, but that just, you know, just my viewpoint.
I've woken up dreaming about this tree.
I'm sure.
I've given a lot of thought to it. So, sorry.
So, I want to nail down this fence issue. To try to operate on, put on a motion, I want to have support for it. Back fence. Everybody seems to agree the back fence should be board on board for plan recommendations, correct? Side fence. Are we in agreement that he can maintain the chain link fence on the side? I'm fine with it based on the conversation. Okay.
Because we have to, and I always am thinking about what we've done in the past and what we're gonna do in the future, and it is, I am, if someone's gonna come with a chain link fence and knowing that it's never gotten through, that's now gonna start something new. And it's not something we've ever really sounds like we've done in the past, so I'm stuck on not consistent. And again, if we were to say, we'll keep the chain link, what's our reason for keeping that? And that's where I think we really need to nail that down of like, why is this one gonna stay and others are not? So that if we have a really good idea of why it stays, and it sounds like it's more because you get to see in and it's, you know, I'm not necessarily into the height, I'm more into a chain link. I don't know if I necessarily agree a chain link creates a community feel to me. A chain link,
So you would find with like a 3-foot board on board, kind of.
Well, to be honest, the plan is ultimately I have no fence.
Stephanie, do we have the authority to require a different kind of fence than a chain link fence? Even if it's not 6 feet board on board?
Great question.
Hey, Jim.
Hmm?
How do the liquor laws work if you didn't have a fence? Like if you go down that route with a neighboring establishment and, you know, people are kind of wandering over property line to property line, wouldn't that present a problem with the liquor authority?
Yeah, if we got to that point, we'd have to figure that out. But I'm not a liquor attorney, so I don't know what the situation is with that. I mean, there might be an opportunity, there's been discussion of maybe my side could rent part of his back space in order to do some sort of, the thing is, neither yard's really big enough to get a lot of sort of like density or capacity or energy. But if you combine the two, you can find a creative way to combine the two, like a rental arrangement, then a liquor license could spill over into that property, says the liquor attorney. So this is, we're figuring things out as we go, as we continue to like push around pegs through square holes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So regarding your question about what's the difference with this chain link fence? For me, the difference is it's an interior parcel line, you know, not outwardly visible to the public. There's a programming plan with the neighbor. The neighbor's documented that with an email supporting keeping it. So that's why I'm okay with that side chain link. We don't have that on the rear, which is why I think we should require the fence on the rear.
Okay. Does that change your position or not?
Except we don't know what's happening. Do we? Is there something there now?
Well, the rear, we're talking about requiring the board on board fence.
so are we saying, yeah,
I think just got a consensus on that one.
I know, but they have just a floating board on board fence to me.
Well, it'll still mirror the one that's on the east side of it.
But that'll be on two sides.
It'll be basically an L.
so if we were to say, like, again, someone comes up with a very similar, you know, application. So we would write in, this one's approved because of, it's on the side, it's not in the, like, would we write that piece in, so when someone else comes? Is that, we would have to write some, I would feel we would need to write that in of why we approved it, and going forward, someone that would come in would get that same sort of like approval, and they would know that coming in.
This discussion is part of the public record.
Yeah,
Okay, so.
It would be reflected in the minutes.
Yeah.
of course,
Exactly.
yeah, but that's what I mean, that if we approved it for a very specific reason, and when these come forward, similar ones, we're consistent across the board, and you can speak to why things are approved and why things are not, and when things aren't consistent, I think it's important to write in why we're going against plan.
Yeah.
So if we want to write something in, I'm open to discussing that.
Well, and again, that writing in is the minutes.
Yeah,
What we're
that's
talking about now
absolutely,
is.
we could discuss.
We've
Maybe
done
right,
we've
yeah.
done this before in other areas where we've had to distinguish what we're doing.
Yeah, and I've been in a few of those where we've made,
And kind of related to that, I think when we review a proposal, it's on its merits, on its own. It's not what's going to happen on the property next door. that we really, if we need to follow code, follow the spirit of the East Franklinton Review Board, or Franklin plan. And, we should try to get each property to conform as best we can, with some leeway. So.
So you are still in favor of requiring board on that line?
On just the back side from that back area. I did the drawing.
Right.
But
Rear
Side and side.
the side and the,
Side and rear.
it's basically from the deck railing, right? Going back, so you're going from the railing on the deck is one barrier, and then you step down to the lower area, and then you have the board around that. So the backyard is basically buttoned up, if you will, from a security standpoint and everything. And if I were the applicant, I would be putting a gate in the rear fence, assuming that there might be an alley there. So,
I'll certainly put a gate in the fence.
Yeah, I'm hearing a deadlock right now, on the side fence, two up, two down. That leaves me in the middle. And I'm loath to, as the Brits say, I'm at sixes and sevens. I'm a little undecided on this because, on the one hand, the neighbor, seems to be in favor of this concept. On the other hand, nobody lives forever.
Hmm.
And-
Can I weigh in here and maybe set
Sure,
everything
go
at
ahead.
ease a little bit here? My only concern at this point, I'm happy to build fences or not build fences. My only concern is that we don't need to do this again. I'm not sure the procedure here to move forward. Can we go, is it possible to do approval on the condition that these fences are added, or do I need to come back again and show you on my site plans, new fences?
If you all are fine with that being a staff approvable condition, you would just need to reflect it in the site plan you submit to me to stamp to receive your COI.
Let's just do that. I'll add fences on both sides. Who knows, I may want them anyways. I was trying to be flexible, but if it's an
Takes
issue.
me off the hook, I suppose.
Yes, I'll let you off the hook.
And then the other one was the porch pendant lights.
Oh,
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute.
okay.
How light is the light? One question. Where
Go back.
would it be seen? Where would the light lead to?
Stephanie, you remember discussing this? You sent me a good model that was approved and I used it.
For the porch has a sconce and a pendant, correct? Because I
So,
think one of them was switched over and the other one wasn't.
uh,
yeah, it's like somebody's front porch.
And again, this is another one that you all have the authority to vary. I'm just pointing out inconsistencies with the plan.
I just think this is a porch, it's off the street, it's not sitting out there. And it's very consistent with kind of a residential character. I have no problem with it. I can imagine that it's gonna be a glaring.
I don't have.
All right, I think we've got a consensus on that one.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm following the conversation before we move into motion. So we are gonna, assuming we would keep a condition regarding the fence, no condition regarding the light, and then Mr. Wade, you mentioned evergreens as a swap out. Is that something that we would be conditioning the motion on if that switched to evergreens, or is that just a suggestion?
I was just suggesting that if the rest of the board members think that's a good idea.
I was more aesthetically for the fact that those, what it was proposed would die off in the winter time, so like.
Yeah.
I'm happy to select whatever plant you think is best. More than happy.
All right,
And that's the same thing, assuming you all would, that being a staff approval condition, as long as you show it on the drawings, I can check.
Okay.
And I think that on the pendant light, we should preface that because of its location on the property and in a porch in a somewhat covered area, that we think that it's
in a
not gonna have,
residential district.
yeah, it's not gonna have a huge impact on lighting.
Yeah, that's No, we've got plenty of distinguishing characteristics here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone said the president.
Yeah. All right, maybe I better make this motion.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, move that the application be approved as submitted with the following conditions. First, that the chain link fence along the side, rear, and rear of the yard, I hope that's an accurate description, be replaced with 6-foot board-on-board fencing. Second, that the plantings along the
West.
West.
side.
along the west side of the property that are currently shown as perennials be replaced with evergreen plantings.
And Jim, are you okay with the skirting being something,
With
the
what?
skirting on the deck being something that's more?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And skirting on the deck be replaced with board-on-board to match board-on-board fencing.
It's not gonna be board on board, but it will be.
Well, it'll be,
Match the fence, whatever it may be.
it's gonna be up against the edge of the new fence anyway, so.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Need a second.
second.
Okay. All right. Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Wick,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
Mr. Noffi,
Approve.
Ms. Benner,
Approve.
motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yep, back around. Okay, the next application is EF 23-05-005. Address is 630 West Broad Street. The owner is Marker Development and the applicant is Arch Hall Architects. Staff report, please.
Thank you. EF 23-05-005, the applicant is requesting review and action on landscaping, lighting, and minor architectural modifications for a new mixed-use project located within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The proposal includes a new 7-story mixed-use building that was previously approved, including 2 stories of internal parking structure with 5 stories of multifamily residential. They have nailed down that it'll be 185 units. That was a little TBD last time we saw the project. This also includes double-height commercial spaces along West Broad Street and covered patio spaces for future tenant use. And there's also various levels of outdoor courtyard and amenity space. The project also includes demolition of the existing building on site, which was also previously approved, and a height modification of 22 feet is being requested, which is an increase from the code permitted 60 feet. You all did previously approve a modification to reduce that, or to increase the height to 88 feet 8 inches. So they're bringing it back down a little bit as they move through design. The application previously came before the board in April, July, and September of 2022. At the September meeting, the board conditionally approved the project with the conditions being that the applicant return for approval of landscaping and lighting, incorporate additional activation along the North Grove Street frontage, and then screening of any ground-mounted mechanical in accordance with plan guidelines. The applicant is returning to the board to satisfy these outstanding conditions and propose minor architectural revisions. The primary design changes to the application since the 2022 review include reducing the quantity of windows, reducing the building height, as just mentioned, removing the balconies on the townhome units due to accessibility code, reduced amenity area due to added unit count, resulting in reduced storefront around the grand stair, increasing the unit count to the 185, removing the southwest corner column, storefront door in the lobby being removed from the east elevation, and then extending the brick up to the storefront below the grand stair. The applicant will return for review and approval of signage and graphics. This submittal includes existing condition photos, site plans, floor plans, elevations, perspectives, and material information. The proposal is generally consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan states that a variety of architectural styles are appropriate for East Franklinton and recommend that new construction be integrated into the surrounding neighborhood. Despite changes to the previously approved building, the project remains consistent with these recommendations. The plan states that landscaping material and design should enhance structures, create and define public and private space, provide shade, aesthetic appeal, and environmental benefits. The proposal is consistent with this recommendation. Further, the plan recommends street trees on all public streets. The applicant is proposing street trees on all street frontages except West Broad Street. Staff encourages the applicant to continue working with the Department of Public Service on a solution that would maintain street trees along West Broad Street while minimizing the disruption to pedestrian traffic, i.e. tree grades, etc. Plan also recommends that lighting be appropriate for its location and utilized to enhance security and highlight distinguishing building characteristics. The proposal is consistent with this recommendation. Lights are also recommended to be fully shielded and directed downward. All of the proposed fixtures are fully shielded. While the proposal does include some uplighting, it will be either shielded by the building overhang or pointed directly at the building to avoid light spillage. In regards to the outstanding conditions, this application, if approved, satisfies the condition that the applicant return for review of lighting and landscaping. The ground-mounted mechanical is now screened to plan guidelines, and the applicant has relocated the loading zone further north per previous discussion with the board. Staff continues to encourage the applicant to consider additional activation along the North Grub Street frontage, but understands concerns regarding utilities at the corner of West Broad Street and North Grub Street. Staff considers the previously imposed conditions to be satisfied. If approved, the board would be approving the following code development standard modification: a height modification to allow an increase in height from 60 feet to 82 feet, an increase of 22 feet. Staff is recommending conditional approval that the applicant add street trees along West Broad Street in consultation with the Department of Public Service and the City of Worcester.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? If not, applicant state his name, please.
Brad Parrish with Archell Architects.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie, for the recap. Since we have been with you back in September, we have been through the various developments of the design as well as the construction documents. We have worked with city engineering and the site compliance, and we're in the final step for that. There's a couple issues that, one issue that we need to discuss today regarding the street trees. But we're looking for the COA here to actually get the final site compliance here so that we can submit for building permit. So we're in the process. It's the hopes of Margaret to begin construction or submit for permits here in September. So we want to move the project along. They're excited to be a part of the neighborhood and really see this project come out of the ground. I think Stephanie did a great job recapping the modifications, and obviously it's just the development of the project that we, molded the design a little bit and added and sort of brought the height down. The note regarding the townhomes on the backside, we know that it was very important on Gay Street, and with the project that you heard earlier, having that connection across the street, that those townhomes do fall under a classification that requires some accessibility. So that's why they're more on grade than at a stoop level that we originally intended it to be. To the sort of the increase, the increased amenity again, or the increased unit count again, trying to really solidify that. I think that was up in the air last time as we discussed. So really today we're talking about getting approval for the landscape and lighting. I do have landscape architect and MEP, the electrical engineer here to answer any specific questions on lighting. Just in general, on the lighting, we do have the fully shielded, as Stephanie has pointed out, and we've been very, I think, artistic in the locations that we've had to accentuate the architecture at the base, as well as any future murals that will come. We are in the early stages of developing the signage, brandage, and graphics for this, so that's why we're not talking about that today. As far as the landscape is concerned and going through the city approval, so we had shown that we wanted the 4 trees on our property pushed off. The desire for public safety is to push up to the curb. Unfortunately, there's a massive duct bank, electrical duct bank running under it. The current conversation from the city is move the duct bank to plant 4 trees. which is a big ask of the development and for the development team. And so I think at this point, we have been back and forth. Corda Engineering is our civil engineer, has gone multiple times back and forth with public safety on recommendations. And at this point, we would really like to proceed with a design that is similar to what was executed at the Gravity One, where there's no trees in front. So it might be helpful to pull that in for context for the conversation. And so there's isolated green areas, but then, for potentially future, with the progression of the West Broad, green streetscape along the way, that's what the hope is, that when that carries all the way down, it would finish off much like this. So this is how we would like to proceed. We would very much like to have those on our property, but it's a public safety issue and they want them pushed to the curb. So we're kind of at a catch-22 right now with the city, and what we presented to you and what they're requesting. So we do need to kind of bring closure to that conversation here today. So with that, I will stop talking and take your questions. And if you have any questions with anybody on our team, we'll bring them up here.
Questions for the applicant?
I'm kind of unfamiliar with what you mentioned, like what's stopping it. Is that running down the whole street? Is that why so no matter what, we're just never gonna get trees out there?
Not on that side of the street. Yeah, it runs
And
consistently.
that's probably why Gravity had the same sort of.
It was the same solution.
Sad.
They did the artistic ones and the artistic trees that they created within the middle courtyard.
Yeah, it's just interesting to know we'll never quite have, like, yeah.
Was that an issue with the Gravity One to you? That was so long ago, I forget. But, the debate is what's going to happen to Broad Street, right? With being a BRT corridor, and are they going to start changing the cross section and curb line and everything? So,
That's correct.
it's kind of up in the air. I was wondering, did you actually try to come up with a plan that fit with what the city wanted in terms of the location of the planter?
Well, it's just the duck bank. We can't plant any trees because it's from the surface. So it has to be a low root system to be able to do anything within that.
Well, we had the same problem on 250 High,
Okay.
but we
raised the
planter out, let's push the tree back and planter. And I don't have any dimensional stuff here really. No, I don't know how close you could plant a tree to that duck bank, but I'm just curious if that was one consideration.
Like almost building a planter like on the sidewalk.
We just put there's a city standard for the planters and stuff, and we kept that standard, but instead of the tree being in the center of the planter, we had to push it, a couple feet, more towards the edge of the planter to avoid, I don't know, it was a duck bank, it was some utility.
Yeah, but the duck bank basically runs in the green space the whole way. If you look at the last sheet, A202, yeah, if you can zoom in.
It's labeled E, that's electrical line, is that the duck bank?
Yeah, that's the duck bank. So you can see it's running clearly underneath all of that.
Yeah, but it looks like it's like,
You zoom in, Nolan.
it looks
the
like it's
bottom.
what, maybe 8 feet off the curb? And that, the planters are 6 feet, right?
Yep.
So I don't know, would it be worth just seeing? Could you come up with a plan that?
But at the 250, you raised it up, right? Wasn't it sloped?
Well, there's one planter like that, the rest are all standard.
Okay,
There's one that tilts up towards the entrance.
right. But there's a hard surface towards the curb.
Just, it's only a foot or something.
Yeah, Carrie can, our landscape, let's bring her.
I'll need to swear you in. Come on, pull the chair up. And state your name for the record, please.
Carrie Garrich.
And Carrie, do you swear from the testimony you're about to give be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was actually just going to comment that we did look at that, and we have a special detail that we've used on other projects. And the biggest concern is that this is 18 inches. And we're worried that even with that setback, it's not gonna give us enough to bring that down at the right angle of repose. And we're pinching our sidewalk by shifting it back. So that was, we did look at that. We tried to figure out if that was a possibility, and we.
It's the last sheet in the set if you want to.
It
really shows the
Again, dimensionally, I don't have a sense of what the scale is.
Yeah, that was,
I know what the standards are, so I know that planter is 6 feet wide, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You go to the next sheet, Noel.
Into the last sheet in the set,
Even if
Like in the whole document.
in the whole document.
You go to the very last page, please.
Even if you make the planter
you got
even
the cut.
wider, so you push the tree back further away from the, I just don't know how far away from the duck bank you have to be. I've actually planted trees on top of duck bank.
Yeah,
Well-
the depth of it is it's shallow. That's the biggest issue. If it wasn't so shallow,
Yeah.
we would be fine.
Yeah, that's what we verified with Corda, the depth of it, because we thought if it's deep, then we'll have more room.
Well, again, speaking of city,
Yes, so, and to clarify, our recommended condition, we're not demanding that there be trees there, or we're not gonna stand plans, understanding that there's a little bit of a conflict here between our plan recommends that there be street trees. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding from public service that they were not supportive of the trees in the center of the sidewalk because of the potential disruption to pedestrian traffic. So the condition I'm recommending is just to ensure that we've explored all those options, like tree grades and things like that, that would allow for there to be street trees, but minimize the impact on folks walking.
And it's really a pedestrian safety issue that they want a tree lawn
yeah,
against the curb so that. it's-
especially Broad Street,
Yeah, so it's dividing that
cars keep
pedestrian.
running into gravity, by the way.
Yeah.
So if they had trees there, that might prevent some.
Do they really?
Yeah, but it's like 3 crashes.
Sounds alcohol related to me, but
Yeah,
discussion.
It was our preference to have the trees.
yeah, we liked our original proposal with it off, but obviously we've hit stalemate.
No, I get both sides of the argument. I just think, is there a creative way to pull them closer? Pull the planters closer to the over the duck bank somehow.
Yeah, if the depth wasn't, if it,
It's a creative would like push the trees back so they're not over the duck bank. And it's dimensionally.
But that, interrupts our sidewalk.
Plant them, right?
yeah, and I think the bigger issue is that's not our property too. So it's not, we can come up with something, but it's still the right of way. So, and again, I don't know if we come up with a creative solution and you approve it, it's still not our land.
Stephanie, is there anything that we can think of, like,
Right.
sorry to move the cut shop, I'm trying to think of, I'm just thinking of, like Kim saying, alternative, like maybe out of the box thoughts on how we can include that, like living walls on the building even to give that same greenage, like, I don't know if there was something like that as an option.
There's the artist.
There's the artist coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, the artist is coming up with things like, if we drop trellises off the building.
I love that.
You know?
Well, I mean, my condition is coming from the plan recommendation that there be street trees on all frontages. And so, the nexus between those two things, I have to call that out as an inconsistency and, but similar to, I think the Catalinas project, we've had a similar discussion. It wasn't necessarily about trees, but it was about trying to get some greenery on that, town street frontage. And I think you all put a condition on that one that they had even already asked the city forester about street trees and were told no. And I think you all have suggestions of like planters or something like that, and then they go back. So we had that as a condition, and then, to mark that satisfied, even if the forester still said no, then we would move forward, just making sure that they had exhausted the options of doing like a planter or something. So I think, you all could recommend a condition like specific like that, and then, but understanding that if the answer is still no, it's still no.
So we could condition it upon, street trees along that frontage, if permitted by the city forester. Is that what we're saying? If,
So the issue with this one is because, not really the issue, but the fact that you're already so far into site compliance, like public services already weighed in, we're not normally in this situation. So normally the default is work with the city forester on street trees. And then later through the process, they'll find out whether street trees are or are not supported. Because they already know that there's a conflict with public service, I would recommend that the condition be, working with the forester and public service to make sure that, they can come up with a creative solution.
But we've had, 2-3 conversations with Corda and Carrie already, and we're still at the same, stalemate of move the duck bank, and that just can't. That's not the solution to this.
So the city standard is to do this within the right of way. This is the city right of way standard, right?
So
You're pushing them onto your property, right?
Yes.
So it's not an issue of, that's not your property. That's where the street trees are supposed to go, technically. But because of the duck bank, I'm trying to push it back.
Well, the original proposal, I think, this one, they were in the right. The original proposal.
We pushed them away. And so that's what it's, we designed something and they said, no, you can't do that design because that's not our city standard. So then you have to do the city standard, which is the lawn.
So what I'm getting at is pull the planter out to the street, like to meet the standard, and make it as wide as you want to accommodate the tree. I'd rather give up sidewalk than give up the planters and the street trees. So it means the planters would come out and be that security refuge, right? And if you make them wide enough, you should be able to set the trees back in them away off the duck bank and still get them in there. I'm just speculating because I don't have a scale.
Does the city have a standard for how wide sidewalk needs to be in that area?
Probably.
Yes, which I think is the issue we ran into with the,
But there's a lot of.
Catalina's one.
It's the width of the right of way that dictates the.
But you got more right of way you have to do with here. Right, or not right of way, but you've got more setback from the street than. And it just seems like there's a solution in there somewhere. But.
And from the planning division perspective, like I said, we're going based off what the plan recommends, which is street trees, understanding that there is a conflict at this point with public service and their standards. There was not the opportunity from getting the application to finding out this was a problem to receiving this revised proposal that includes like gravity-esque grass along the street for like us to really engage with public service. And it may make no difference whatsoever. But that was where the recommendation was coming from for us to try to continue the conversation.
That's the statement that they're.
And public service said that they would be fine with this.
The gravity grass.
The gravity,
situation,
which is
they-
this,
that was their
which is this.
that planning does not love it because the plan recommends trees along the street.
And so those are probably 4-foot.
There's probably 8-foot sidewalk. Yeah,
Right,
you have 8.
So give up some of that 8-foot sidewalk.
But it's still not a width thing, it's a depth. So
Well, no,
you're saying you're raising.
I'm talking about setting the tree away from the duck bank. How wide's the duck bank?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about, I'd say it's about 6 feet wide looking at this, where you could see the dash line.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you could see see the limits of the dash line. So the net, yeah, you gotta really.
That's not a duck bank, that's
So
like
is there more than, because this is 36-inch wide, is that not the duct bank that is the problem?
Okay, so yeah, okay, there. So that's, sorry.
No,
So
okay, I just wanted to make
when
sure
it
there wasn't
meanders,
another.
meanders. Yeah,
That's part of the problem,
it
is the way it
meanders.
comes in on an angle. So we'd have to really set it far back, that as we.
We're losing probably, we're taking an
No.
8-foot to a 4-foot.
It's gonna impact for consistency, it's gonna really impact as
What
we
if
go west.
what if you took it back another 2 feet?
But look at the west side here, how the duck bank goes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
So see, this is the pinch point this side.
Yeah.
And what we had is an even rhythm of 4 trees across the front. right? Because we wanted to really make sure that it stopped before the main entrance into the amenity area of the complex.
You guys know Broad Street, it's just,
I'm,
it's a bear. The more you can get buffer and greenery, it's like, that's what I keep thinking, but. Because the thing about gravity is it's got the eddies, right? So you can get off of Broad Street and come into the spaces, right? You don't have that necessarily here, you still have more of a flat.
But it sounds like we don't really have a practical solution.
I,
Is that what I'm hearing? It's not a comment, it's a question.
I feel like it's a technical problem to solve. We don't have the technical, all of the data.
Okay.
So is it, are we looking at, are we asking the board to approve the conditions similar to gravity? Is that is before us? Is that what?
That is what they're proposing at this point.
But the city is saying, no, that's not.
no, the city's saying okay with the gravity solution.
DPS is saying that. I'm saying that that's not consistent with the
Yeah.
recommendations.
Right.
So there's two different city
Yeah.
standards.
Planning staff sticks to the plan.
It seems like it's kind of the easy hands-off in our.
Yeah. And then, if we're gonna deviate from the plan, it's not gonna be on their recommendation if we deviate from the plan. I think that's where we're at right now. Is that right? Yeah, okay.
I guess my question is, it doesn't sound like we're all experts here and we're kind of like going like there's gotta be something. What was your role again? Or like, is this what you specialize in? Is this? Or
Yeah, I'm the landscape architect on the project, and so we did,
in your experience in it?
yeah, so we did look at moving these planters and things that we've done in the past. As Kim had mentioned, moving back the trees, looking at these, thinking the root ball is probably going to be 24 inches on some of these trees, maybe 30. So pushing that back far enough and still accommodating pedestrian sidewalk, we felt like it was too pinched. Putting pedestrian safety above all, if they want to bring that tree lawn out to the curb, we understand that makes sense. But again, that's a huge area. If we were to bring everything to the curb, that would be its own precedent, right? So.
These are raised planters, right?
No, these were in grade.
Standard raised planters?
No. So these are in grade,
Broad Street, or Main Street,
right,
Yeah,
not High Street.
right.
How would that though change if they were raised? Because I think that's what I was maybe getting at earlier. It's like if these were raised up a little bit.
Well, you're still gonna have the pedestrian conflict, so they still, DPS they want them on the curb, which I don't think, we really can't do that on the curb. It's still gonna be the same.
What would the width be then, if you did like raise and you were still little to the curb, would it be more than 4 feet wide?
Yeah, it could potentially be more than 4 feet, but again, I don't know how I don't think that would fly with our other city, the forester. I don't think that would.
Would there?
So we are up against a lot of different plans that we're trying to get approval for, because that won't.
Are there any alternative, I'm again trying to help, it's been all of this, but, are there any alternatives to like maybe ornamental grasses or something like that could fly instead of trees in that sense, Stephanie?
well, that's what we're proposing, right?
Well, I think just in this
Or in-
particular
Yeah,
section.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, I would say like the gravity.
That's more of grass. I'm thinking like of something that maybe has a little bit more.
Yeah.
Taller,
A little
taller.
bit more of a barrier as
Yeah.
we're talking about again, like at that part of Broad Street, it's going to be very loud because it's a lot of coming off of the freeway, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are grasses that we could put in there.
Or even hedges of some sort that will.
I think we were trying to be consistent with what gravity was doing, just looking at that, understanding that contextually that would be similar. And again, it's the same duck bank, so we know it's impacting multiple properties. And we thought that for now, that's the best solution. Thinking ahead that maybe the Broad Street corridor, that's going to impact this too.
So anything we do is going to be subject to this transit solution at some point, to do. Is that correct? If it happens.
Do they already have a concept for the East West border?
I believe so.
Yeah. I think I've seen them
Yeah.
published.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what they're, I can't remember what they're proposing.
I believe there are. I would be able to take that into consideration in doing my evaluation.
So I'm not convinced yet that something can't be made to work there that brings out, again, I'm sorry, I thought they were curved because that's what I'm used to on my street. But so bring the tree lawn out to the curb, but set the tree back so it clears the dug bank and see what kind of sidewalk you want.
Yeah, and I wish I had those
I'm
dimensions
sure
for
you
you.
can.
But it looks as if at the pinch point, it's gonna be like 4 feet.
We did study that and we did do, and it, yeah, we don't feel like a 4-foot sidewalk in that area.
Right, if that.
On the
lower
corner. And I don't know what the
So,
standard would be.
so you've got property going back to the building, maybe there's a jog of the sidewalk there. I know that then it becomes not right of way versus private.
Yeah, and I guess we were, those are tenant spaces potentially hoping to activate some sort of, what if there's a
But if
tenant.
you get another 2 feet or something, it's like, it's getting down to dicing up, like feet to make something worth it. But
Okay, so this is one issue, obviously, we're not gonna solve here. How about everything else?
Before we
Yeah,
go any further, maybe not, the rest of the board has not weighed in.
okay,
Well, Mr. Way has been
but,
weighing in considerably.
I apologize.
No, you have nothing to apologize about. I think we need we need discussion on this. Jim, you're kind of shaking your
I've
head.
not been tracking the issue well enough to have one. It's complicated stuff and my equipment is crapped out on me, so I can't even track it mostly. I'll say this, I do agree that some sort of visual, like vertical element needs to exist along Broad Street in order to provide some inclination for the encouragement for people not to speed so much. It's not the best traffic calming effort, but it's important, I think. So I think this is an important thing to figure out. Sure. And Michael's point about whether these are vertical planners, or whether these are actually 3D out of the ground is a very good one. I couldn't make that out from looking at it. Just the planners themselves will serve as a visual sort of cue, even on Broad Street. I'll add that.
Well, I'm with Michael on this, kind of trying to get creative, and I also agree Broad Street. Everyone wants trees on Broad Street, that's what we need. Knowing that this is probably gonna be something that keeps coming up, if this is what is lined with Broad Street, like what can we do? Are there experts out, I don't know, I don't know enough about this, but obviously we all want trees, but it might be something, can we solve or can't we? And if not, what's the creative option of so I don't know enough about it. I think we kind of all agree with that in a way. I think everyone, yeah.
We're all repeating the same.
And I'm not smart enough to be like, this is what we should be doing. So, or I'm not in that.
But I'll always pick a tree.
Yeah.
That's what my job is. So I'm always
I'm
gonna
just giving my opinion.
go for the trees.
It'd just be nice if I think of something that could help, again, if we're going forward with it, knowing the things that have passed through gravity in the past and knowing the issue that's here, I don't know what else we could really do to suggest a conversation with the forester. And just to see if there's any other creative opportunities.
Be possible to have them return just for this particular issue.
So something
After further consultation with the city forester and whatever other.
It's really
authorities you
DPS.
Consult with,
Yeah, it's really DPS that is,
excuse me?
it's DPS that's not allowing this. The forester hasn't weighed in on this. It's DPS that's, yeah. So, and we really have gone back and forth with them over and over, and they will not budge on this issue. They will not allow us to push that back. So,
But have they told you how far away from the dug bank you have to be with a tree bulb?
no, but knowing it's only 18 inches and down, and understanding that the 2/3 of your tree roots are going to be laterally spread.
Urban condition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, You know, maybe
To your question, yes, you could, make that a condition, out of just understanding of the effort that they have already put in, and again, like, we as planning have had really the chance to chime in with public service, but, I would say that if you are considering this as a condition, I, would request you entertain the idea of that being staff approval. I'm hearing that obviously trees are the preference, but if not trees, something as vertical as possible to, so I feel confident that I could, you know, be a part of the conversation with them and with public service that we, you know, land on something, even if it is the gravity condition, just to not hold them up, because if they have to come back and just for that.
Okay.
But one other question for you guys. It would, I mean, I understand that we want it to be trees, we want it green. Because, you know, that's how oxygen is made, but I guess how. But what if it was sculpture? What if it was something else that broke it up?
The condition in the, that I'm recommending is just because the plan recommends street trees on all public streets. And the fact that this situation is creating that they are in a situation where they don't think they can do that, that's really where I'm coming from, is from a place of street trees specifically. And then I'm hearing from you all that if street trees, you know, are generally exhausted and can't happen, that some other. Go ahead.
I think the safety factor, the safety issue, right, having something, the buffer between the sidewalk and the street is probably the most important thing. And whatever that is, does it have planting in it? I don't know. But
Even if it's, again, I'm going back to those trees like gravity, the fake glass habit, the glass ones that they have in the courtyard, maybe putting something out there and then throwing some moss on top, at least we're getting a little bit of everything there.
art in the public right away then becomes a liability.
Yeah.
That's.
It's a whole other thing.
Again, we're happy to further this conversation. We just don't want to hold up the approval process for the building permit to start construction to get vertical here. So I think that's the biggest concern of mine sitting here and happy to explore, because this is an item that's going to probably be 18 to 2 years away in coming to fruition. So there's plenty of time to come up with a solution that satisfies everybody's need.
Does the step bank continue west along Broad on the other site?
The other side, yes,
Plans on?
yes.
So same.
We're going to have the same discussion.
So I mean, we're talking about a pretty wide, long stretch of Broad Street that's going to be affected by this issue. So I think it's worth consideration. I mean, I sympathize with you, the frustration of having plans and departments that are at conflict with each other. That's very frustrating. But at the same time, I think it would be a huge improvement to have not only a visual barrier, but a safety barrier, you know, going down Broad, the gravity proposed, what they did there is not great, in my opinion. If we extended that all the way down both sides of the street, I don't know that we can all be happy with that. And so
and I do
I
think
think
it's.
Kim's idea is worth exploring. I also don't want to hold up your, going vertical. If there's a way to.
So, all right, I'm hearing a consensus that we would all love to have street trees if at all practical, right?
Yeah.
I think that's, and Stephanie has suggested that we could make this conditioned upon, further discussion with the Department of Public Safety and any other city authority to determine whether that is practical or not. If so, if not, any alternative would then be subject to staff approval. Is that what I'm hearing? Is everybody happy with that? Okay. We have any discussion on any other issues that are involved in this project?
I would, I'll have any questions about the lighting, you can see on the renderings, just because they do have their lighting person here, slow. we do have that like grand stair and the mural that's gonna be illuminated and some of the other soffit art. If you have any questions about how that's gonna be attached to the building, or like any of that ground lighting, because the plan says fully shielded and directed downward, so they do have some things that are directed at the building, which is not downward. So if you have any questions about any of that, I would encourage you to ask their lighting or lighting person over here.
So because with video screens and not just static. Georgia Tech did it.
Not in cards right to that.
Yeah, so you can see here where, how, you know, the night rendering of how some of that lighting will happen. Do you have any questions about that?
Okay. I like it.
No questions.
Any questions?
The only thing that jumps out to me is the neon 630, kind of like so close to the church. Just seems like opposite ends of the spectrum.
Okay. We'll bring that back with the signage and graphics, so we can have a discussion about
Like nightclub church.
It's not red lights, it'll be boy devil church.
But yeah, it's part of the sign.
All right, any other discussion? If not, I'm entertaining a motion. Let's.
I just missed one again.
All right, here we go. All right, move that the application be approved, subject to, the applicant working with the Department of Public Safety and any other, government authority to determine feasibility of, planting street trees along the West Broad Street frontage. If determined to not be feasible, then any alternative landscaping along that frontage shall be subject to staff approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Wei,
Approved.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
Mr. Nafi,
Approved.
Ms. Benner,
Approve.
Mr. Sweeney.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Next application is EF 2305-006. Address is 500 West Broad Street, Gravity Project. Greg Kitzmiller is the applicant, the Gravity Project LLC is the owner. I will add that the staff approval COA was issued on April 7th, 2023. Applicant has since needed to relocate the sign, which is no longer staff approval. As such, this particular application was added to the agenda. Staff report, please.
Yes. So just to add to that, you'll notice when we get to staff approvals, I did issue a COA for this, but they had to move it due to structural concern. In its new location, they're proposing it be less than 10 feet from grade, which is why I had to bring it to you all because it wasn't consistent with the plan. So EF 2305-006, applicant is requesting review and action on a sign for a tenant space within the Gravity development in the Broad Street subdistrict. The proposal is for one round internally illuminated projecting sign with a black cabinet, white acrylic face, and applied vinyl decals. Total graphic area is 18 square feet. That's 9 square feet per side. The submission includes a site plan, elevations, and detailed specifications for the proposed signage. The proposal is generally consistent with the East Franklinton graphic design guidelines. The guidelines state that a wide range of design styles are appropriate for East Franklinton and includes recommendations on size and height for specific types of signs. The proposal is generally consistent with these recommendations, with the exception of the proposed height and grade. The applicant is proposing 9 foot 4 inches, whereas the guidelines recommend 10 foot clearance. Proposed sign is under the overhang of the building and does not extend into the public right of way. The proposed sign is pedestrian oriented in scale, has a clear message, and does not interfere with any architectural characteristics of the building, all of which are consistent with the guidelines. Staff notes a COA was previously issued for this tenant in April 23. Due to structural issues, the sign had to be relocated. As a result, the new location, the sign is no longer staff approvable due to inconsistencies with the guidelines. While the proposal would deviate slightly from the 10 foot clearance, recommended in the plan. Staff is supportive of the proposal as it is generally consistent with previous approval at this location and is not located in the right of way. Staff recommends approval without condition.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Applicant, state your name, please.
Great. Kidsmiller.
And you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give be true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
Okay. Do you have anything to add?
And no, I mean, Stephanie pretty much summed it up. We had to move the sign because there was no blocking behind the wall to support the weight of the sign. And so that's why the new location, but the overhang prevents us from taking it up to the 10-foot height. The way it's designed, though, visually, it is to be consistent with the Mayans so that it keeps a sight line across. So basically, that's about it. It's
Questions for the applicant? Discussion, if any. I'll entertain a motion.
I move for approval.
Move to approve. Mr. Sweeney? A second. Bush seconds. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Way,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
Mr. Noffe,
Approve.
Ms. Benner,
Approve.
Mr. Sweeney.
Approve.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Sometimes you're lucky to be last.
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to everybody else. It's easy.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Make a record, don't adjourn. Staff approvals, EF 2305-001, 500 West Broad Street. Oh, is this what we just dealt with? Yeah.
Yes, so for these, we just need a motion to adopt these as their record. And if anyone needs to recuse themselves from either of the staff groups, I can note that,
All
but
right. So EF 2305-001, yeah, news 10-inch sign at Gravity, EF 2305-002, 440 West Broad Street. Lake Compton's the applicant, Gravity Projects LLC is the owner, exterior modifications, like for like repair and replacement of damaged storefront materials.
from where a car drove through the building.
Oh, that is the, all right.
To entertain a motion at this time. See your motion,
We need a motion and a second.
move to approve, anyone?
Okay.
Second?
Second. Ms. Benner? Okay, that's right.
I guess I did.
So to clarify, was that a second by Ms. Benner?
It is.
Yes, okay, wonderful. Roll call, Mr. Burks,
Approve.
Mr. Way,
Approve.
Mr. Bush,
Approve.
Mr. Noffe,
Approve.
Ms. Benner,
Approve.
Mr. Sweeney.
Approve.
Motion carries.
Our next meeting is Wednesday, June 28th, 3 o'clock, right here. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I'll see you
So
immediately, Grant.